and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports Network. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson. And for the next hour, we're going to be giving you everything from our notebooks. That's right. We've been all over the country. We've been listening to coaches and players, media days from across the country, media days, takeaways, all of our thoughts, all of what we learned. We're here to share it with you to help get you ready for the start of fall camp and, of course, the 2026 season. Now, we will begin in the Big Ten, where we just were together. So, Tom, it's good to see you. Glad you made it home safely on that very long commute from downtown Chicago back to your house. However, I didn't get to hear everything despite all the time we spent together. So with a little bit of distance, what's one of your biggest takeaways coming out of Big Ten Media Days?
Yeah, I think one of the things that strikes me is, a lot has changed in the sport of college football in recent years. But when it comes to this time of year, when you're trying to figure out which teams are going to be good, one of the staples that you always have is, well, who's their quarterback? And you kind of look at that situation as to be like trying to figure out what that team's ceiling is, what that team's floor is. And, we spent a lot of time in Chicago talking about the quote unquote, the big three: Oregon, Indiana, Ohio State. Those are clearly the teams that are be at the top of the league, or we expect will be at the top of the league. And a lot of question marks about, well, who's going to be that fourth team? Who's going to be that fifth team? And I think when you look at the quarterback depth of the Big Ten, in which we're entering a season where 18 schools are in the league, and I would say maybe 3 or 4 of them have like legit question marks at quarterback. Everybody else seems set. It's hard to figure out who that team is going to be, because you go up and down the board and you're like, well, no, they're pretty set at QB. They're pretty set at QB. So it makes it far more difficult to really identify that one team that is going to stand out, which I think for the fans, for the viewers, I think is going to be fun, because every single week you're probably going to see some upsets here and there, or at least some unexpected results. What I do wonder, though, is if it will be good for the Big Ten as far as the college football playoff is concerned, because last year the league only got 3 teams in, because there were 3 clearly cut, top teams in the league, and then there was a little bit of a divide in that tier. I think we're looking at a situation to where the quote unquote second tier of the Big Ten is better this season than it was last year. But it could be like, we hear from the SEC every year where everybody kind of beats up on one another in conference play, and it causes some teams to miss out on a playoff. So maybe once again, those big 3 are the only 3 that get in, because there's just too many good teams up towards the top of the league this year.
Thinking about that middle pack with the different quarterbacks that you mentioned, as you're explaining that, I'm thinking about Demond Williams, who we know has that high ceiling with his playmaking. Rocco Becht, if he can make the jump from the Big 12 to the Big 10. Who are some of those other quarterbacks, either that we spoke to or didn't, that we're just picking up information, that you think are good quarterbacks to keep an eye on? And maybe if you are a fan of the Big 3, a quarterback that you should be wary of for his upset potential.
Well, I'll start with Jade Mayava, who's not one of those big 3 schools, but I definitely feel like he's probably one of the big 3 quarterbacks in the league. Like, I have more confidence in Mayava than I do in Indiana's Josh Hoover at this point, simply because Hoover hasn't played in the Big Ten yet, and I have fewer questions about Mayava. But once you get past that tier, I don't know what Minnesota is going to be. But I do know that Drake Lindsay is getting NFL draft buzz for a reason. We were able to spend some time with him. Very big kid, big arm. And we've seen Minnesota kind of lean more into the pass with him as their quarterback last year than they typically had in years prior. So I wonder if we're going to see more of that, where they're going to be more air forward than they have been typically under PJ Fleck with their ground game. I look at Illinois getting a transfer in Kattenhauser, who, maybe not a household name, did start his career at Michigan State, was very productive at ECU. I don't know if he's going to be able to do the things Luke Altmaier did. Altmaier is one of the best quarterbacks in that program's history, but I don't think the drop-off is going to be that significant. And then another guy I would say is like a dark horse that possibly teams aren't, or most common fans aren't really paying close attention to. Malik Washington at Maryland. This was a highly rated prospect coming out of high school. He was an Elite 11. I think he won the Elite 11 the year he was in it. He ends up in Maryland last year, has a very good season for a true freshman, despite the fact that his receiving core let him down quite a bit. In fact, the 39 drops that Maryland receivers had last year were the most in the country of any team by a country mile. They have improved at the receiver position. They were able to bring back a ton of their top talent. They were a very young team last year. They're still going to be young this year, but Washington just gives them a ceiling that I don't think we're typically used to seeing Maryland have. So if things break right, if he takes a step forward, if he has better receivers around him and some of the young dudes they have on that defense step up, Maryland is kind of a sneaky team that I don't think anybody's paying attention to. I think, in fact, when you talk about Maryland, the only thing anybody talks about is Mike Locksley being on the hot seat.
Yeah, Malik Washington set Maryland freshman records last season. You mentioned the drops that were already working against him. He also could have left. I mean, there was a market for someone of Malik Washington's talent, but the Maryland kid wants to stay home. The great pivot point into one of my big takeaways, which is a little bit also old school. In this era where we talk about college football being the mini NFL, the continued professionalization of college athletes because of NIL and the transfer portal, Dante Moore appreciates his opportunity to be one of the greatest Oregon quarterbacks of all time. Both head coach Dan Lanning and Dante himself mentioned what it's like to see Heisman Trophy winner Marcus Mariota come back, walk around the building, be around Eugene, to really be treated as a star. And Dante told us, Tom, that the NFL will be there, but you don't get but that many chances to really be a starting quarterback at a high level. And playing for the Oregon Ducks as QB1, that is one of the biggest stages in all of college football here in 2026. He knows there are some areas where he can improve on his game, and he's looking to work on it. But man, this is almost from a vibes perspective, just somebody who seems to really enjoy being in college. And I know a lot of college football fans feel like the soul is being taken out of the game with the way that players are being paid and moved around and signing contracts. And I'll tell you that Dante Moore, who could have been a top 10 NFL draft pick last year, if he was about the money, he would be taking that money in the NFL right now. He is about his legacy. And I think as a college football fan, I think that is incredibly exciting for the sport as a whole.
Yeah, you mentioned the money, and there's some reaction to like Moore coming back to Oregon, and people are like, well, he's still getting paid plenty of money to be the quarterback at Oregon, and it's true compared to what we were dealing with in the past. Dante Moore is making a lot more money to be Oregon's starting quarterback than the guys he's looking to replace or at least join as far as the pantheon of Oregon quarterbacks. But there's a huge difference between the money Oregon's able to give Dante this year compared to what the New York Jets would have given him as the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. So money is part of the situation. But I think more than anything, it's recognizing that, hey, I'm pretty good, but I can be better. And when I do get to the NFL, I'd like to be a little bit more polished and a little bit more ready to compete right away in the NFL, because it's not just about getting there for him. He clearly wants to be a good quarterback in college, but he also wants to go on to the NFL and be a good quarterback in the NFL. And you don't typically see that kind of thought process from kids his age. And I think it's refreshing, and I think it's good, and I think it's terrific for Oregon because, we were just talking about quarterback depth in the league. Oregon has something no team has, quarterback depth on its own depth chart, because Dante Moore comes back, but they also get Dylan Raiola to transfer in from Nebraska, who not only has 2 years of starting experience, he's got 2 years of starting experience in the Big Ten. So you look at the situation, so many of these teams we talk about, like a quarterback injury could derail a season for Ohio State. It could derail the season for Indiana. I'm not saying Oregon can afford Dante Moore to get hurt, but if Dante Moore does get hurt, you've got a really good player right behind him to step in, and that way your goals don't really change. So for him to come back, I think it's a tremendous move for him. And, we talked to Dan Lanning about it. He seemed pretty thrilled with the fact that Dante chose to come back as well. Like he even said, when we approach him about it, it's like, obviously, we want him to come back, but we want him to make the best decision for him. And we didn't expect him to come back because, again, he was being projected as the number 2 pick. So when it turns out he is returning, like that's a huge move for Lanning and that staff, especially considering, they lost their offensive and defensive coordinators. There was plenty of turnover. So to have that and then possibly have to break in a new quarterback as well would have been a lot of transition for them. But at least they've got this constant back. And you look at this roster from top to bottom, Chip. Like it's national title or bust, I feel like, in Eugene.
Evan Stewart had, quote, the best offseason of his career. That was an assessment from both Lanning and Dante Moore. The wide receiver room finally healthy. The defensive line is so good that the backup defensive lineman had to go elsewhere just to even get on the field. They're being considered one of the best players out there. And one other Oregon note that stood out is apparently Dante Moore's teammates call him Adam Sandler because he always dresses comfortable. We'll see if we can turn that into any good pieces of internet content throughout the season. There are multitudes to Adam Sandler. We'll see which Adam Sandler he'll be on any given week. One final bit of fun and frivolity, Tom. One of my biggest takeaways from the Big Ten media days was maybe something I could have guessed for a head coach who's in his 60s and has been nothing but coaching ball for more than 30 years. It's that Curt Cignetti doesn't care much for music festivals. We asked Curt Cignetti if he wanted to, speak to a fun game, real or fake, Lollapalooza. And Tom, did he want to participate?
No.
No.
It was a very quick one-word answer from Coach, and it was probably, honestly, of all the questions we asked coaches all week and all the answers we got, I think that one-word response was probably the best answer to any question we received all week. Just typical Curt Cignetti. He's not here to goof around. He's not here for the BS. He just wants to coach football. He just wants to talk football. He doesn't want to play silly games with us, a bunch of dorky podcasters.
No, but we did enjoy our time with Curt Cignetti and, of course, with all of the coaches and players there at Big Ten Media Days. And coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Southeastern Conference, where Lane Kiffin is among the many new hires making a splash, and so much more. Next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson. Some of our takeaways from all of media days. Yes, over the course of the last month, we've had Big 12, ACC, SEC, and Big 10. And now that it's all done, well, we get to come and pour over our notes and figure out some of our strongest takeaways as we prepare to give you our official preview to the 2026 college football season. So as we turn our attention to the SEC, Tom, what are some of the big headlines for you coming out of the SEC?
I'm tired, Chip. It's, every single year we get to the point in the season where it becomes politicking time. It's campaign speech time where coaches just start heading into their press conferences after every game and start explaining to you why their team deserves to be in the college football playoff, why it deserves to be in consideration for an at-large bid. And you know what? When it's happening in late October through November and then into December, I don't enjoy it, but I get it. But why do we need to do it in July? Why are SEC coaches stepping up to the podium, making their case for a playoff bid before we've played a single game? You've got Steve Sarkisian out here talking about, well, if we go 9-3, with our schedule, we should probably be a playoff at large. And you know what? For the most part, I agree with them. They have a very difficult schedule. And if they go 9-3 against it, I would argue they are definitely one of the better teams in the country. But can we save it? Can we save it until there are results to debate? It is so tiresome to hear these things already. Tell me about your team going into the season. Tell me things I should know about your roster. There are plenty of questions on it, like we know Arch Manning, we know your offensive line, but not just Texas, all of these teams. Tell me about your team. I want to hear about your players. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you're expecting. I don't want campaign speeches. I don't want to hear about strength of schedule in freaking July. It is pointless. It is tiresome. We don't know what the strength of schedule is. So for them to start campaign season and get their talking points all together right away, it's just, come on. You guys claim to be one of the best conference in college football. And you know what? For the most part, I agree. I don't think you have the top teams like the Big Ten does, but I think as far as depth is concerned, you are the best league. You are the most difficult league to play in. I'm 100% with you on that. But stop just pointing to strength of schedule and start telling me why you're going to win football games, gentlemen.
Yeah, if you are a true national championship contender, if you want to put on big boy pants in the 2026 season, pre-explaining a 9-3 record is a loser mentality.
Yes.
It's only going to lead to being a loser. Because if you're imagining already that you might end up with 3 losses, you've already lost a game, if not 2. No, that is not the mentality that leads to sustained excellence. When you're dealing with this sport that is defined by winning at the absolute margins, you've got to think that everything is going to be a win. You've got to think you're going 16-0. You think Curt Cignetti thought for a second about how he was going to explain away or a 2-loss or a 3-loss season? Or do you do it relentlessly, one snap at a time? Loser mentality, hate to hear it. And like you said, once the losses have piled up, if you want to point to strength of schedule, when you're fighting to get the committee's attention and we're in the season, that's fine. But everyone's got 0 losses. Stop trying to tell me about what you should be rated as if you've got 3. I'm right there with you. Did not like that whatsoever. I like these new coaches. In general, we've gotten some upgrades in entertainment, some upgrades in coaching, some definite upgrades in optimism from the top to bottom. The SEC had a ton of turnover in the league, and Lane Kiffin at LSU is going to be the one that gets a lot of attention. Lane Kiffin did not actually generate that much attention himself, but wait until we get going with the season. And I think that his filibustering that he used to eliminate all the questions and answers, that's not going to be there for you. Pete Golding had no filibusters. He was ripping it like a defensive coordinator. Here we're going to talk, and then we're going, and he was just supposed to have a normal one. No, we're never going to have a normal one with Pete Golding. John Summerall was up there cussing up a storm. Alex Golesh is bringing a kind of attitude that you want from someone who is leading Auburn out of the cloud. And then there's Will Stein at Kentucky. Why are we going to win? Because of me. That is the kind of attitude that a program like Kentucky needs. Ryan Silverfield stepping in at Arkansas as well. Just all across the board, Tom, I'm looking around, and I think that in almost every coaching change, if it was not an upgrade in coaching by my analysis, it is without a doubt an upgrade in optimism at a key SEC location.
Yeah, I think the new coaches are bringing in some new blood, maybe some new ideas and a new energy into that league. And it is kind of funny. You mentioned Lane Kiffin didn't really have any headline quotes that we typically come to expect from Lane Kiffin, which was a big surprise to me. But I guess Lane felt he made enough headlines over the offseason that he didn't really need to cause a stir at SEC Media Days. But I'm with you. I have a feeling that once the games start, we're probably going to hear a bit more from Lane Kiffin as far as, some quotable things that we can discuss. But it was an interesting SEC Media Days outside of the politicking. And you mentioned, Will Stein's answer to me is one of the best answers I've heard from any coach in a media day this summer, maybe, probably in the last few years, because the truth of the matter is, you might hear a coach say, we're going to win because of me, and you think he's cocky. And it kind of, strikes an echo of what Curt Cignetti said when he first got to Indiana, talking about how they're going to kick Ohio State's butt when nobody had any right to believe Indiana was ever going to do anything of the nature. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a football coach and you reach the level where you are the head coach at a Big Ten or an SEC program, you believe that anyway. It's just very few coaches are ever going to vocalize it. But I'm happy that Will Stein does, because honestly, if you don't have that kind of confidence in yourself as a coach, you're probably not going to succeed. So when you take over that Kentucky gig after spending, years as the offensive coordinator at a winning program at Oregon and seeing the kind of blueprint and what it takes to build that kind of success, yeah, if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to win. So to step up there and get that question saying, hey, why Kentucky? Why do you think you're going to win here? Because of me, because I think I'm a very good football coach. I think I can hire other good football coaches, and I think I could find good talent that fits my system. So it was a very honest answer. It was a very unique answer, and it was a very refreshing answer.
I saw that John Summerall is bringing, I said he was cussing up a storm. He also brought a lot of great insight into his approach and into his mentality as he's trying to flip the switch in Gainesville. What'd you pick up from him in terms of being able to apply it to what Florida could be maybe this year and in the first couple of seasons under Summerall?
I think he's just a breath of fresh air, both for the SEC and for that Florida program. First of all, he was the one coach who, when asked about having to play the 9-game conference schedule, was like, who cares? I'm a head coach in the SEC. I didn't come to coach here because I thought it was going to be easy. I'll play 9 games. I'll play 10. Put them all on the schedule. I'm going to play them. I think I can win them. Again, it's that kind of confidence and bravado that Will Stein shared that John Summerall does, where he's not up there complaining about the situation he's in. He's embracing the situation he's in. And I wish more coaches would do that. But also just that kind of attitude for Florida. If you look at where that program has been since Urban Meyer left, clearly Urban had a ton of success there, won multiple national titles. And there was a kind of a toughness, a direct demeanor that Urban had that maybe got him in trouble in the NFL, but worked for him at college, that has kind of been lacking in that program since he left. I feel like the coaches they've had have been a little too nice. Dan Mullen, great offensive mind, very good football coach, but didn't really, have that kind of bloodthirsty demeanor that you need to compete for national titles. Jim McElwain was the same, and obviously Billy Napier did not work out. John Summerall's not coming here to be Mr. Nice Guy. John Summerall's, playfully yelling at, reporters for having their phones going off during the press conference. He's bringing a sort of discipline to this program that I think has been lacking. Bruce Feldman wrote a great story on it in The Athletic last week during SEC Media Days. I thought he made a lot of great points. I think this is a program that's been very lost in the wilderness and has not had somebody that is capable of leading them out, of being a real leader and face of the program in charge since Urban Meyer. And I feel like John Summerall can be that guy. If you look at what he's done at Troy and you look at what he did at Tulane, the man's been a head coach for 4 years, Chip. He's won 3 conference titles and lost a 4th conference championship game that he was in. His teams are always good. They're always in the picture. He believes in himself. He's bringing a discipline to this program that I think they've been lacking. And I don't know if Florida's going to be competing for an SEC title right away. I don't know if they're going to be in the playoff right away. But I do think this was a terrific hire for them, and I do think they are very much headed in the right direction.
I agree with you. It could be an 8-4 season, but we'll know it with our eyes based on how they play against the likes of an Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Obviously, the Georgia game is going to be huge. My last parting shot here for the SEC is just an assessment of the realities of Southeastern Conference football heading into 2026. The modern Southeastern Conference, 16-team league, 9-game schedule. Here's my assessment. Texas wins July, Georgia wins December. Because daggum, walking around, you would think Texas had already been anointed. You would think that they already wore the crown. They got Arch Manning, and they got all the portal additions and all the Lamborghinis. And yet, was Texas playing in the college football playoff last season? No. They were sitting at home getting ready for the Cheez-It Bowl, okay? Georgia is the team that has won each of the last 2 Southeastern Conference championships, and yet they are flying under the radar. And yet, Kirby Smart is being asked about his team as though they're still running ground and pound from 2012. He's like, oh, your team's based on running the game, run game and defense. It's like, I'm sorry, I saw Gunnar Stockton throw for 300 yards against Ole Miss in the regular season. I saw Gunnar Stockton light up Tennessee's secondary. This is a Georgia team that is being disrespected, and I've never seen a disrespected 2-time SEC champion quite like we have, but that is only because of the flash that is Texas. So can Texas, which has been winning in July a lot, remember they started as a top 4 team in the preseason polls last year. Can they actually be winning in December? Kind of a fun way to look at those 2 powers sitting atop the SEC. Or is this the year? We can't even say Texas is back because they've already done the back thing. But is this the year that Texas in the SEC really has their breakthrough?
I think so. I think this is probably the most talented team that Sark has had since he took over at Texas. And that says a lot because they've had very talented teams. They've sent a lot of players to the NFL since they've joined the SEC and, while they were still in the Big 12. And I also think that kind of puts Sark in a pretty precarious situation because I do think you wonder if the Longhorns don't break through and win the SEC, or God forbid they miss the playoff again, you kind of start to wonder, well, if it wasn't this team, when's it ever going to be under Sarkisian? And you start to wonder if they're going to start looking elsewhere.
Yeah, pressure-packed season in Austin. We absolutely love to see it. And coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the ACC, where James Franklin has a new home. He's creating some buzz in Blacksburg and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, dumping out the notebooks. I mean, just giving you everything we've got as we've been all over the country, getting in our takeaways, our conversations, the ways that we prepare even better for the 2026 season. Now we look at the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's been a couple weeks, but the storylines still remain. Fall camp will open soon. And Tom, what is one of your biggest thoughts, takeaways coming out of the ACC?
Chip, you often hear people say, like, X sport is better when Y team is good. And what that translates to is this team was good when I was a kid, and I liked my life better when I was younger because I hadn't had to face any kind of real world kind of adversity yet. So college football is better when Virginia Tech is good. And dagnabbit, James Franklin just has me feeling all warm and fluffy about the Virginia Tech Hokies going into 2026, which is not a surprise because we are very familiar with James from our time spent with him at Big Ten Media Days while he was still at Penn State. And we know he brings that kind of infectious energy and optimism, but just having him there, having him kind of hyping up and being, the politician, the guy at the head of the room, making everybody feel special, getting ready for Virginia Tech football has me feeling great because honestly, when I look at the ACC going into the season, we know Miami's going to be good. Miami was in the title game last year. They've got a good quarterback in Darian Mensah. They've got a lot of talent. They're your clear and heavy favorite to win that league. But man, there's a whole lot of wiggle room after that top spot for teams to maneuver and kind of climb up to maybe get to Charlotte, can play for an ACC championship, maybe sneak into the college football playoff as an at-large. And I just look at James Franklin taking over Virginia Tech, which I feel like is a great program fit for him because while he was at Penn State, it was never a problem winning games. The problem was beating the really good teams like Ohio State and Michigan and then Oregon to break through to the top of the league and win the Big Ten. Those teams don't really exist in the ACC outside of Miami. I look at this. He brings a full roster with him almost completely from Penn State. They've got a really good recruiting class coming. I love Ethan Grunkemeyer at quarterback, and I was just kind of feeling good about the Hokies going into media days, and James took it to another level. I don't know if I'm going to get way out over my skis and say that the Hokies are going to be in Charlotte taking on Miami in the ACC championship game just yet, but you know what, Chip? The Hokies might be in Charlotte taking on Miami in the ACC championship game.
That is the return to standard. That's why you hired James Franklin. Virginia Tech joined the ACC in 2004 and won 4 of the next 7 ACC titles. There was a span from 2004 to 2016 where they played for the ACC championship 7 or 8 times. But to your point, as you introduced the hot and young theory to this unprecedented CBS Sports Network platform, we haven't seen Virginia Tech really running hot since 2010. Tyrod Taylor, getting that team to the Orange Bowl. And so James Franklin steps in. And the thing that I'm excited about is that he can modernize. Like he went to Vanderbilt and he said, this is the way that we can modernize. This is the way that we can take advantage of an opportunity. That opportunity at Vanderbilt was Florida and Georgia, not exactly running hot. And he seized on that, kind of like how Clemson and Florida State, not exactly running hot, an opportunity to seize on that. Then he gets to Penn State. Yes, Bill O'Brien officially got them out of sanctions, but really this was still a program that had been operating by old Joe Paterno rules, and he had to show them how to be able to level up on the recruiting trail and elsewhere. I'm not ready to push them to Charlotte just quite yet. I think there are some other teams that might be a few cycles ahead in terms of the big race of college football. But I'll tell you what, after 5 losing records in the last 6 seasons, that ain't happening in year 1 under James Franklin. He'll have this team 7-8 wins and be laying the foundation for what the Hokies are going to be moving forward. Like you said, we've enjoyed our time with James Franklin. I'm excited to see how comfortable he is in his new setting out in Blacksburg. Well, Tom, I want to pitch you a team that I do think is going to be playing against Miami in Charlotte. It's a team that rolled in very much acting like the outsider. Charlotte, North Carolina-based event. Well, here come the boys from Dallas. They got on cowboy hats. They got on Kevin for Jennings Heisman shirts. They were on message from start to finish. The SMU Mustangs, who were in the college football playoff 2 years ago and 1 game out of playing for the ACC championship last year, they view themselves as a team that is ready to go compete with absolutely anyone in the country. And Rhett Lashley, he is already doing the campaigning, not to explain away a 9-3 record, but to talk about demanding attention for that competition at the top of the conference. As a former Miami offensive coordinator, he's got his own connections there. He and Manny Diaz share a relationship as well. There was a lot of moving in the same direction in terms of making sure the spotlight for the ACC is not just on you getting your one designated survivor that we're just going to throw in as a 7 seed. No, he wants to make sure that that there is enough respect for the ACC, that if Kevin Jennings is in the mix for individual awards, that if SMU is winning double-digit games, they're going to get a chance to be able to get back as well. The SMU relationship with the ACC is fantastic because I mentioned the outsider, but this is a school that said, we will take zero media rights dollars and fund our athletic department ourselves. And all of the money they're getting is what they've been winning. I just think that kind of attitude is fun for fans to consider. And I think the talent on this roster that Rhett Lashlee has assembled, certainly Kevin Jennings at the top of it, is good enough to be able to get them right back to the college football playoff.
All right, so if I sober up off of the Hokie Kool-Aid, I can admit that, yeah, you're right. I mean, SMU is probably your clear-cut second best team in the ACC going into the season, and I think that speaks to a few things because they've been good ever since they got into the league. It's surprising how a team comes up from the American, joins a Power Four conference in the ACC, and kind of dominates for the most part. Like, they haven't gone undefeated, but they've been a mark better than a lot of the teams that they've faced on a weekly basis, which speaks to Rhett Lashlee and his ability as a coach. It speaks to Kevin Jennings probably being one of the more underrated or underappreciated quarterbacks in the country, does not get a ton of national attention, doesn't really get discussed a whole lot when it comes to like things like the Heisman, but tends to perform at the level of a lot of the guys that do get mentioned in those conversations. And three, it also speaks to just how poor the ACC has been in general as a conference these last few years. But this is a very good program. It's a very good team that, if I'm picking a team that I genuinely, honestly think has the best chance to not only get to Charlotte, but maybe pull off that upset and take Miami down and get in as the conference champ, I would probably go with the Mustangs before I went with anybody else in the league. It's just, again, I'm really, really drunk on Hokie Kool-Aid right now. I got that turkey flowing through my veins.
Clip it. We'll share it on Thanksgiving. That's about as good as we can get. For all the flowers we just gave SMU, they did put us as college football fans in a real predicament by not just beating Cal. A 3-point loss in Berkeley on the last window, the late window of the regular season could have prevented us from a 5-way tie for second place, which led to then 7-win Duke being propelled to the ACC championship ahead of a Miami, ahead of an SMU. SMU could have been there, but just didn't happen. So the ACC had its way too overcomplicated tiebreaker procedure. And on the first day of ACC Media Days, they introduced a new one. Tom Fornelli, did they get it right?
No, they went from an overly complicated tiebreaker procedure to a slightly less complicated tiebreaker procedure, but still overly complicated tiebreaker procedure because, again, I love college football. I love a lot of the dumb things that happen in college football that make it unique and fun. And the ACC is certainly playing into that by having a league where some teams are going to play more conference games than others. So that's one of the byproducts of having 17 teams in the league and a scheduling agreement with Notre Dame, but also an agreement to where we're going to pay out television rights based on television ratings, and dang it, our big teams are going to sue us if we don't give them the bigger game. So it's going to lead to an uneven schedule. So you've got situations where okay, one team might be 8-1, another team might be 7-1. Now we've got to figure out which one is better. And it's stupid. I feel like the best thing that the ACC could have done is, if we're gearing everything towards the college football playoff now as it is, and if your goal is to not just get your champion into the league, but to get a second or possibly a third team into the league, your tiebreaker should just be the college football playoff rankings. Whichever team's ranked higher, congratulations, you're going to Charlotte. That should be it. It's that simple. It optimizes your ability to get multiple teams in, but I guess you'd rather go with silly math that nobody understands.
Yeah, it could lead us to a situation where we do not know until Sunday afternoon of the conference championship week who is playing in the conference championship game. I will note, in defense of the ACC and their decision to go with their process, it is very similar to what the Mountain West has had recently. And typically when the Mountain West has broken its 3-way ties with this computer rating system, the team that goes is the best team, or at least the team that I would rate as the most talented, most successful, most likely to go and win you some games. For example, it would have put Miami in last year as the opponent for Virginia if they had this year's tiebreaker procedure, which, as it showed with Miami's path all the way to the national championship game, that they were the ACC's best chance to go on a run and win some games in the playoff.
Chip, did you say you were going to defend the Power 4 ACC's decision because they're modeling themselves after a G6 league?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, Chip.
Yeah, it's overly complicated. Tom, your takeaway is right. It's just a cartoon. All right. One last note here. I think that Darian Mensah is the main character in the ACC this season, and I think he checks all of the boxes. He is the preseason ACC Player of the Year. He is the ACC's likely top candidate to be able to contend for individual awards like the Heisman Trophy. Miami is the best chance for the ACC to have a national championship contender. And given what we've seen from him over the last 2 years at both Tulane and at Duke, it is very clear to see how, with an even improved supporting cast around him, Malachi Toney, Mark Fletcher, and more, that he can have his best season yet. You know, a little bit of the Cam Ward production without having to deal with the defense that let Cam Ward down with the Miami team 2 years ago. But at the same time, transferring from the ACC champions to the likely ACC favorite on the last day that you could enter the transfer portal, sending Duke scrambling to have to get San Jose State's quarterback in, it really showed a divide in the food chain, even within the ACC. We talk about how the food chain has all these Sun Belt players. They're all gone. All conference teams, they're gone. They go up into power conferences. And then even within the power conferences, Tom, this even shows the food chain within the conference. Darian Mensah made some comments at media days about maybe the relationship about his money compared to the rest of the locker room. I didn't like that, but he just encompasses everything about college football, including being the face of the U trying to get back into the national title picture.
You did leave out the part where he also said he was going to come back to Duke before he then entered the portal on the last day and went to Miami. So, like, yeah, there are definitely sore feelings. I was not a fan of some of his quotes talking about, like you mentioned, the fact that he felt ostracized a bit in the Duke locker room because he was so clearly making more money than a lot of his teammates. It's like, okay, great. I don't know why you need to throw your teammates under the bus for your decision to leave and go to Miami, because nobody's really going to blame you for making that decision. Not in this modern era of college football. It's a completely understandable decision to leave Duke to go be the quarterback of the team that was in the national title game last year in the Miami Hurricanes. So I think it's one of those things. It's a problem in the summer. It's one of those things that kind of causes you to raise your eyebrow. But the truth is, like, they're really good. He's a very good player. They're going to win a lot of football games, and nobody's going to care come late November when Miami's playing, you know, for an ACC title game or setting themselves up for an ACC title game in college football playoff berth. If he gets them to the playoff and he makes another run, none of us are going to look back and say, well, I still think what he said about his Duke teammates was a little, you know, a little subpar. But it's a great situation to be in. It's true. He's got a much better team around him. And, you know, he's not a massive upgrade over Carson Beck, as some of maybe our producers want to feel, but he is an upgrade over Carson Beck. And I do think that this is a Miami team that you look at their schedule, you look at the rest of that conference and what they have to deal with. Like, they're definitely going to get to the college football playoff. If they don't, it was a major disappointment. And they are one of those teams you look at with Mensah, who could win the Heisman, as a team that has a legit shot to win it all this year.
Yep. Will be very interesting. And just to circle back on it, you know, big J journalism here. Duke's players who were there 2 days after Darian, like, nah, he was cool. He had a good time. You know, they painted a very different picture about those locker room dynamics. No bad feelings outwardly expressed on the Duke side of this. I don't want anybody to think sour grapes. Blue Devils are moving on with eyes on, once again, exceeding expectations and contending for an ACC title, much like they've done for each of the last couple years. And coming up on the other side, the Big 12 was first, so we got to reach way back. But hey, Notebook still has some takeaways. We'll share them with you and more next. This episode is brought to you by PNC Bank. If you've ever watched a football game with someone who doesn't normally, you might have been asked, what's the point of running the ball up the middle? And sure, to the uninformed eye, these plays are boring, but they result in a lot of short, reliable gains while managing the clock. It's just like why PNC uses a boring, methodical approach. because reliable gains while keeping an eye on the time are just as important for your money as they are in football. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. Brilliantly boring since 1865 is a registered mark of the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc. PNC Bank, National Association, FDIC. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, Media Days takeaways from a tour of the country. Now our eyes are back on the Big 12, which got Media Days season started at the beginning of July. Still some pieces that we need to follow up on. Tom, what are still some of those lingering takeaways coming out of the Big 12?
A lot of new faces appearing at that podium while they were doing the coach interviews. Four new hires at Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and then Utah with Morgan Scalley taking over for Kyle Whittingham, and just kind of different vibes that I got from all of them as far as how I look at their programs. Because, when you talk about the Big 12, this is the league, I would say, that has the most change from year to year. Like, you look at it, Texas Tech is clearly the alpha dog in the league based on what they've done in the transfer portal and on their recruiting path since Oklahoma and Texas lost. BYU has been very impressive the last couple of seasons. And then after that, you're always kind of like, well, it could be any number of teams that step up and make a run at it. And I feel like with some of these changes, Iowa State's long been one of the more, respectable programs in that league. But with Matt Campbell gone, taking the Penn State gig, Jimmy Rogers coming in, bringing in an entirely new roster, I'm not feeling great about the Cyclones going into this year. But then on the other side, Kansas State was a disappointing team last year. They didn't have a horrible record, but compared to expectations, they fell flat. Back in comes Colin Klein, the prodigal son, taking over the program. We saw what he was able to do with that Texas A&M offense. If he can get that same out of Avery Johnson that he did at Marcel Reed, you're feeling really good about the Wildcats. Eric Morris steps into a situation at Oklahoma State where they didn't win a dang game all last season, but he was terrific at North Texas, brings a lot of the guys from that team with him, including quarterback Drew Mestamaker. You expect they will take a big step forward. How big of a step remains to be seen. And then at Utah, just more questions about the Utes than I can ever remember having, because Kyle Whittingham was there for 20 years. It was pretty much the same program every single season. The players changed, but the coaching staff was always the same, and you knew what you were going to get. We don't know what we're going to get typically with Morgan Scalley as the head coach, because he's always been the defensive coordinator. He's never been in the big chair before. There's clearly going to be some kind of adjustment period for him. And not only did Whittingham leave, but he brought a lot of players with him. He brought some of the coaching staff with him. There's just more questions around the Utes than I can remember having for a very long time.
Another one of those faces on the player side is Baylor quarterback DJ Lagway. And look, my takeaway sounds cheeky because my takeaway is that he is setting records on the VR headset. Okay. But I want to explain that. Okay. I'm not just, knocking the story that Dave Aranda tells us about the VR company coming to him and saying that Lagway is setting records, because there is very earnest excitement about how DJ Lagway's move from Florida to Baylor, linking up with Jake Spavital in this offense, could really bring out the best for DJ Lagway and could save Dave Aranda's job. We saw the Baylor offense with Sawyer Robertson be very, very productive last season and help him up, very quarterback friendly. I don't know where you're at with Lagway, but I think that this is a spot where if he's been spending all this extra time trying to get used to what Spav wants to get out of him from the offense, and he's seeing the field well, what we saw last year, he should be able to put up big numbers, right?
Yeah, I think Lagway could have a good season for Baylor. The problem is they didn't have a problem at quarterback last year. Sawyer Robertson was the best player on their team, and they still lost far too many games. So unless they've upgraded the rest of the roster, a lot of questions about the Baylor Bears going into this season.
Coming up on the other side, our view is not limited to the power conferences, so we're going to send you out of here, the group of 6 team to watch, maybe one that's under the radar, and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, and we are not going to be limited to just what we learned from power conferences. Let's expand it with a little under the radar group of 6 teams to watch. Tom Fornelli, who's got your eye?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the New Look Mountain West, where I feel like a pathway has been opened. Like UNLV was a very good team in the Mountain West last year. They have Dan Mullen back as their head coach. They brought in Jackson Arnold to be quarterback. And there's always a high floor with a Dan Mullen team because he's a very good coach. But when you look at the teams that left the Mountain West compared to who replaced them, Chip, this schedule ain't that difficult, man. I feel like the Rebels are a team that could easily end up winning the Mountain West and be kind of like in that 12-0, 11-1 range that could get them into the college football playoff.
Let's go to the American Athletic Conference, which has sent teams to the college football playoff last season. But Tulane, Memphis, and North Texas all have coaching changes. How about UTSA? Jeff Traylor, Owen McCown back, fourth year as the starting quarterback for the Roadrunners. And the biggest takeaway coming out of the offseason is he's finally healthy off-season surgery. So keep your eyes on the Roadrunners to be able to make some noise and college football playoff contender. Well, if you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, come check us out on the Cover 3 podcast. Scan that QR code and download the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts.